Welcome to this talk on Diencephalon. The Diencephalon is the caudal part of the forebrain, which is also called the Prosencephalon. It is a complex structure with equally complex function and development. It is responsible for the vegetative functions in the human body. Hence, it is the head of the endocrine system, the diffuse neuroendocrine system, and the limbic system. It is also considered to be the largest integrating center for subcortical sensory responses via the thalamus. It is therefore a very important structure in the human brain. Above the diencephalon, no other area is important in keeping the system under check. The diencephalon controls the whole of the autonomic nervous system and has a major function in somatic system, especially as it relates to the sensory apparatus. The diencephalon develops around the third ventricle, and hence its cavity is the third ventricle. Also, its medial aspect is formed by the basal ganglia, and so the structures are interwoven in a complex manner that can easily confuse the inexperienced. Only careful coronal sections, which is presented in this lesson as stained specimen or presented elsewhere as unstained gross brain, can unravel this complex relationship. But diencephalic structures tend to occupy the posterior aspect of the complex of the diencephalon and the basal ganglia, forming the lateral wall of the third ventricle in this position. The diencephalon is divided into the following parts. Number 1, a thalamus. This is the most massive and the most highly developed of the diencephalic structures. Number 2, hypothalamus. This is placed ventral and below the thalamus. Epithalamus. This is placed dorsal to the third ventricle and thalamus. Number 4, the subthalamus. This is placed below the thalamus but a little dorsal to the hypothalamus. The thalamus is the head of a sensory system below the cortex. It receives sensory input from all parts of the body and passes them via the thalamic radiations into the sensory cortex. It is connected to various parts of the brain and spinal cord. So we have connection to the spinal cord via the spinothalamic tracts. It is connected to the cerebellum via the cerebello-rubrothalamic tract. The cerebellar part of this tract passes into the superior cerebellar peduncle. It is connected to the basal ganglia via the thalamus striate tract, which interconnects the thalamus with the striatum. The structure of the thalamus. The thalamus is rounded in shape with an inferior projection called the pulvina of thalamus. Medial to the pulvina is the metathalamus, which is made up of two important structures as follows: the medial geniculate body and the lateral geniculate body. Superiorly, we have the centromedian nuclear groups of the thalamus, which are interconnected via the third ventricle by the interthalamic adhesion or massa intermedia, that is, left and right parts of the thalamus. It is separated from the caudate nucleus by the striae terminalis, which contains the terminal vein. It is placed posterior to the caudate nucleus, but medial to the internal capsule, which separates it from the lentiform nucleus. It forms posteriorly the lateral wall of the third ventricle. It has the following functions: sensory input function, which it passes on to the cerebral cortex; emotional function, which is not fully defined; vegetative function, which is equally not well defined. It has the following parts, which in turn carry nuclear groups: dorsal, which is divided into medial and lateral nuclear groups; ventral, which has three distinct nuclear groups; ventral posterior nucleus. This is further divided into ventral posterolateral nucleus, that is VPL for the somesthetic system of the body, and ventral posteromedian VPM nucleus for the projections of the trigeminal thalamic tract. Ventrolateral nucleus VL is for superior cerebellar peduncular projection. Then you have ventral anterior nucleus. The lateral part has the following parts: the pulvina, lateral posterior nucleus, lateral dorsal nucleus. Classification, which takes into consideration simple nuclear groups and not the topography, is as follows. There are the following nuclear groups in the thalamus: anterior nuclear group, intralaminar nuclear group, lateral nuclear group, ventral nuclear group, medial nuclear group, midline nuclear group, metathalamus, unclassified thalamic nuclei, and finally thalamic reticular nucleus. Centromedial nucleus, which carries the massa intermedia, is in the intralaminar nuclear group. Metathalamus contains the medial and the lateral geniculate bodies. The hypothalamus is a structure placed ventral to the thalamus, and it is separated from it by the hypothalamic sulcus. Aside from its main body, it has the following parts: the mammillary body, tubercinarium, infundibulum. The main part is divided into medial and lateral groups of hypothalamic nuclei, efferent projections. The hypothalamus receives fibers from the following: cortico-hypothalamic tract. These fibers keep the hypothalamus in check by the cerebral cortex. Thalamo-hypothalamic tract. This tract helps to interconnect the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Retino-hypothalamic tract. This tract interconnects the retina with the hypothalamus, thereby allowing visual activities to influence this highly vegetative functional organ. Hypocampo-hypothalamic tract. This interconnects the hippocampus, which is part of the archicortex, with the hypothalamus. Amygdalo-hypothalamic tract. This tract interconnects the amygdala with the hypothalamus. Its function, just like that of the hypocampo-hypothalamic tract, is mainly reproductive, but also includes taming of aggression and etc. In Clover-Bosi syndrome, described by Clover and Bosi in the 1930s, the monkeys whose amygdala had been removed were found to be hypersexual, docile, and very attentive. Functions of the hypothalamus. This is the main vegetative functional organ of the diencephalon. It is responsible for the control of the autonomic nervous system, the diffuse endocrine system, the endocrine system itself, and also emotional and behavioral mechanisms, since it is a part of a so-called mesolimbic system. Epithalamus. The epithalamus is placed at the back of the diencephalon. It is made up of 4 structures: 1. The pineal body, 2. Habenular trigones or nuclei, 3. Epithelial roof of the third ventricle, and 4. Striae medullaris thalami. Pineal body. This gland is unique because it is both sensory and neural. It contains pseudosensory pinealocytes and endocrine pinealocytes, which have been classified as paraneurons. Endocrine pinealocytes release the hormone, which has been identified as melatonin, into the third ventricle, a process that is now called ventriculocrania. The hormone functions in circadian rhythm and probably also in reproductive mechanism. Habenular trigones. These contain habenular nuclei, which are interconnected via the habenular commissure. The habenular commissure is one of the 2 posteriorly placed commissures of the brain. The other is the posterior commissure, which marks the junction between the midbrain and the diencephalon, and is placed below the habenular commissure. The habenular nuclei project fibers into the pineal gland. Also, fibers from the nucleus of the posterior commissure and lateral optic tract and the nucleus of the perirubar area all project into the pineal gland. But the pineal gland itself has no efferent projection anywhere, suggesting it is a bona fide endocrine gland. Striae medullaris thalami. This is made up of several fibers in the diencephalon and the upper part of the midbrain. They are formed by fibers from the various parts of the brain as follows: the globus pallidus, lateral preoptic region, septal nuclei, and anterior thalamic nuclei. Epithelial roof of the third ventricle. This is a bona fide part of the epithalamus. It just simply covers the roof of that ventricle. Subthalamus. This is a small structure in the diencephalon, which is connected, strangely enough, not copiously to the diencephalon, but to the small brain via the amygdala. It has a subthalamic fasciculus by which it is connected to the thalamus. This Fasciculus is connected to the padidofugal system. The subthalamus is placed ventral to the thalamus, but caudal and lateral to the hypothalamus.